Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, let's jump in. The Galactic Council was made up of some of the most powerful beings in the entire galaxy. They ruled over many planets, their decisions shaping the lives of millions. But what most didn't know was that the Council had one big flaw. They thought they knew everything. And that's where they made their biggest mistake. You see, when they were told a human diplomat was coming to meet with them, they thought of him as just another weak human, someone easy to manipulate and control. But that couldn't have been further from the truth. This human diplomat, who seemed so ordinary, wasn't ordinary at all. He wasn't just any negotiator or simple ambassador. He had a past, a hidden life that no one knew about, one that would soon reveal itself in a way no one, not even the Galactic Council, could have predicted. The Council thought they could simply push him around, scare him, maybe even imprison him. What they didn't realize was that this was no ordinary human. This diplomat had once been a legendary warrior, someone whose name struck fear into enemies all across the galaxy. And now, after years of keeping his true identity a secret, the time had come for him to show exactly what he was capable of. It was too late for the Galactic Council to turn back now. The moment they made their move, they had sealed their fate. The Galactic Council had no idea what they were about to unleash. Their attack on the diplomat wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was carefully planned. The human was seen as a nuisance, a small but necessary part of the diplomatic process. They believed they could intimidate him, perhaps even threaten him into submission. After all, how much power could one human diplomat really have against an entire council of intergalactic rulers? But what they didn't know was that this diplomat had lived a life far from the ordinary one they assumed. Years before he was assigned to the council meeting, he had been part of a secret galactic order, trained in the arts of combat, stealth, and diplomacy, skills that made him one of the most formidable figures in the galaxy. His past was a story only a few knew, and even fewer understood. Back in the day, the diplomat had been known by a different name, one that whispered fear into the ears of his enemies. A name that, if it had been spoken within the council halls, would have caused a moment of hesitation, maybe even panic. He had fought in wars, negotiated peace between warring planets, and even single-handedly taken down a notorious crime syndicate that had plagued the outer rim of the galaxy. His skills were unmatched, and his reputation was feared. But he wasn't just a warrior. He was a strategist, a master of manipulation, and above all, a hero who had walked away from the chaos of his past. After the last battle, he chose to leave his violent ways behind, to work for peace through negotiation and diplomacy. He buried his true identity, living a life that seemed to be peaceful, even unremarkable. His new mission was simple: to avoid conflict and help others without drawing attention to himself. However, that life was about to shatter in ways he never imagined. The council thought they could control him. They had no idea that their actions would awaken something deep within him, a side of him he had kept hidden for years. The moment they laid a hand on him, the diplomat felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that had kept him alive through countless battles. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. Instinct took over. As the Galactic Council's agents surrounded him, he remained calm. His heart didn't race with fear, but with something else, determination. He had been in worse situations before, and he'd come out victorious every time. The council members, arrogant and overconfident, didn't know that they were facing someone who was far from helpless. The first move came swiftly. One of the agents lunged at him, expecting an easy takedown. But the diplomat's reflexes were lightning fast. With a single motion, he ducked low, grabbed the agent's wrist, and twisted it with enough force to break the bone. The agent yelped in pain and dropped to the floor, incapacitated in an instant. The other members of the council's elite guards froze for a moment, unsure of what they had just witnessed. For a split second, there was silence, a silence that spoke volumes. The diplomat, still calm, looked around at the guards, his expression unreadable. The smug, arrogant faces of the Galactic Council members suddenly seemed less sure of themselves. They thought they were in control. Now, they were beginning to doubt whether that was still true. The diplomat stood there, his posture relaxed but ready, like a lion just before the hunt. He knew what was coming next. They would send more agents, perhaps more advanced ones, and each time they underestimated him, he would make them regret it. The first agent might have been easy, but the real challenge was coming. But even as the fight began, there was one thing the diplomat wasn't prepared for. The feeling that had been growing inside him for a long time. It wasn't just the anger of being attacked. It wasn't the fear of the unknown. It was something deeper, something that tugged at his heart every time he remembered the people he had fought to protect in the past. The desire to make sure this attack didn't happen to others. He had to stop the Galactic Council's tyranny, not just for himself, but for everyone they had ever wronged. This wasn't just about survival. This was about something far bigger. A chance to show the galaxy that peace could never be achieved through intimidation and violence. It could only be achieved through understanding, mutual respect, and, if necessary, strength. As the guards closed in, the diplomat's mind raced. He was outnumbered, and the odds were not in his favor. But his experience told him that he didn't need to win with brute force alone. He could outsmart them, outmaneuver them. They wouldn't expect the kind of tactics he was about to employ. Without warning, he moved again, this time with a speed that surprised even the guards closest to him. He disarmed one of them in a flash, using the weapon to incapacitate another. His mind was sharp, his movements calculated. The diplomat was no longer just a negotiator. He was a warrior once again, and the Galactic Council was starting to realize that they had made a grave mistake. The tide of the battle began to shift, but it wasn't just the diplomat's skill and speed that turned the tables. It was the shift in his mindset. For years, he had suppressed the warrior inside him, choosing diplomacy over violence. But as each move he made was met with more resistance, the realization hit him. There would be no peaceful resolution here. The Galactic Council didn't want peace. They wanted control. And they had underestimated him terribly. Now, the diplomat understood that the time for words was over. His actions, swift and decisive, spoke louder than any speech he could give. His reputation, long buried beneath layers of politeness and diplomacy, started to rise to the surface once more. The guards who had once been certain of their superiority now hesitated. They weren't dealing with a simple diplomat anymore. They were dealing with a seasoned fighter, a tactician who had turned countless battles in his favor, and someone who had faced down enemies far more terrifying than them. He continued to move like a shadow in the chaos, quick and silent, his body a well-oiled machine trained for combat. Each strike was calculated, each movement a step towards a goal. The diplomat wasn't fighting just for his survival now. He was fighting for something far bigger. He was fighting for the people the Galactic Council had oppressed for centuries. The Council had underestimated him in another way. They didn't know that he had spent years studying their weaknesses. Their arrogance had blinded them to the fact that their empire, built on control and fear, was fragile. The diplomat had heard whispers of dissent among the lower ranks, of leaders who were growing weary of the Council's iron grip on the galaxy. He had allies, even if they didn't know it yet, and today they would learn the truth. The diplomat's mind was a whirlwind, processing everything around him, every sound, every movement. He could hear the commotion from the Council's command room, where their top officials were no doubt watching the events unfold on monitors. They had expected the guards to handle him easily, to lock him away, and continue with their plans. They were wrong. He moved with the precision of someone who had spent his entire life preparing for moments like this. When one of the guards attempted to rush him from behind, the diplomat spun around, grabbing the soldier's arm and using his momentum to throw him into the others. The sound of bodies crashing against the walls echoed through the hall. But the diplomat didn't pause. He couldn't. He knew the stakes were higher than ever. As he took down another guard, his mind flickered back to the old days. It was as if the battles of his past were all rushing back to him, filling him with a sense of purpose. The warrior within him was fully awake now. He wasn't just protecting himself. He was protecting a future where the Galactic Council could no longer impose its will on the galaxy. It was a dream he had almost forgotten, but now it burned inside him like a fire. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, and that feeling filled him with both power and determination. He was no longer just a man caught in a political web. He was a force to be reckoned with. And the Galactic Council would soon understand that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have ever anticipated. The guards around him were slowly beginning to realize that this wasn't just a simple negotiation gone wrong. They were dealing with a hero, someone who wasn't afraid to fight for what was right, someone who had the power to bring their empire crashing down if it came to that. And that thought filled them with fear. But fear didn't stop them. As more reinforcements arrived, the diplomat found himself surrounded. There were too many to take down all at once, even with his exceptional training. His body, though strong and skilled, was starting to show signs of exhaustion. The battle was taking longer than he expected, and as much as he wanted to keep fighting, he knew he couldn't do it alone. That's when he heard it, the soft hum of energy weapons charging from behind the walls. It wasn't just the guards now. The Galactic Council was bringing out their secret weapon. The diplomat had prepared for this. It wasn't the first time he'd been forced into a situation like this. He had always expected a trap, and this one was no different. But this time, it was worse. They had access to the latest tech. Lasers that could incapacitate a person in seconds. Energy shields that could neutralize even the most skilled fighter. It wasn't going to be easy to escape this. The diplomat's instincts kicked in, and he ducked behind a series of pillars just as the first blast of energy lit up the space where he had been standing. The heat from the blast was enough to singe his clothes, but he was still unharmed. He had to keep moving, keep thinking. He couldn't let the Galactic Council's weapons take him down. With every passing second, his options grew slimmer. But then, as if guided by fate, his eyes fell on a small console against the wall, something he hadn't noticed earlier. It was a communication terminal, the kind the Council often used to broadcast their orders. If he could access it, he might be able to turn the tables, maybe even broadcast a message to the rest of the galaxy. A message that could expose the truth about the Galactic Council for everyone to see. It was a long shot, but he didn't have many options left. The diplomat ducked behind a nearby pillar, taking a deep breath. His hands were steady despite the chaos around him. He had done this before. Hacked systems, broken codes, infiltrated the most secure facilities. Now, it was just a matter of time. His fingers flew over the terminal's interface, and with a slight grin, he realized something incredible. The system was vulnerable. The diplomat had anticipated that the Council, in their arrogance, would overlook such small details. They had gotten too comfortable, assuming that their power would protect them from any real threat. He quickly bypassed the security protocols and accessed the central system. As the terminal hummed to life, he began typing a message that would change the course of history. As the terminal hummed to life, the diplomat's fingers moved with expert precision. The message he was about to send would be more than just a warning. It would be a call to action, a beacon for anyone who had been oppressed by the Galactic Council's rule. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him, but there was no turning back now. His mind was sharp. He bypassed the final layer of security with a quick sequence of commands, and suddenly the terminal was unlocked. A flood of information appeared on the screen. Plans, communications, secret dealings, and most importantly, the names of council members involved in illegal operations across the galaxy. The diplomat's heart raced as he copied the data, knowing that this was the kind of evidence that could take down the entire council. But it wasn't enough to just gather the evidence. He needed to make sure the entire galaxy saw it, knew about it. With a steady hand, he pulled up the broadcast system. This terminal was connected to the very communication networks that the Galactic Council used to control all media and public announcements. A wicked grin spread across his face. If they thought they were in control of the narrative, they were about to find out how wrong they were. He started typing a message, his fingers flying over the keys. It wasn't just an exposé. It was a challenge, a promise that the galaxy would no longer tolerate the Council's tyranny. As he typed, his thoughts drifted back to everything he had lost. The years spent hiding, the people who had suffered under the Council's rule, and the friends he had once fought beside who never made it home. He couldn't allow the Council to continue their reign. Not anymore. This was his moment. Finally, with a single key press, he hit send. The message flashed on screens across the galaxy. It was everywhere, on news broadcasts, in the comms of spaceships, and even the quiet terminals of people living on the outer colonies. The truth, raw and unfiltered, spread like wildfire. Every plan, every betrayal, every corrupt deal the Galactic Council had ever made was laid bare for the universe to see. The room fell silent. The guards who had been surrounding him paused, stunned by what had just happened. Some of them even took a step back, the realization sinking in. The diplomat's victory wasn't just physical. It was intellectual, strategic, and it had the power to unite the galaxy in ways they hadn't seen before. The Council's secrecy was no longer their weapon. It was their downfall. But the fight wasn't over yet. The diplomat wasn't finished, not by a long shot. He knew the council would come for him now, with everything they had. The broadcast was only the beginning. As the final confirmation beeped on the terminal that the message had gone live, he stood tall, ready for whatever was coming next. The council would not rest until they crushed him, but he had one advantage. He wasn't alone anymore. The galaxy had seen what the council was truly capable of, and people would rise to fight back. He turned to face the remaining guards, his body bruised and bloodied, but his spirit stronger than ever. They might have more weapons, more soldiers, but he had something they couldn't take away: hope. And hope, when spread across the galaxy, could topple even the mightiest empire. The fight was just beginning. The story ends here, but the battle for the galaxy is far from over. The diplomat's message had ignited a spark. The Galactic Council was about to face an uprising like nothing they had ever seen, and the hero who had once walked in the shadows was now the symbol of resistance.